Welcome to A Cup of Happy. I'm your host, life coach, mom, and friend, Nicole James. I'm so glad you've joined me to talk about life and the journey from our past to our future as we navigate the present in order to create our very best life. So grab your favorite drink, get comfy, and let's chat over a cup of happy. Hi friends, and welcome back to another episode of A Cup of Happy. My name is Nicole James. Amy Woods is the woman that you get to meet today, right here with me. Her story is sure to have your head spinning. She has been through so much, and she has overcome every bit of it. Today, she is living a life that she loves, despite everything that she's walked through. If you feel a connection to her during this conversation today, please reach out to her and let her know that you found some inspiration in her words. All of her information can be found in the show notes. Without any hesitation, any further, here is my conversation with Amy Woods. Hi, Amy.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good.
Thank you so much for coming.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. So in this series, I've invited people to speak about different traumas that they've been through.
Right.
We do want to examine those, but afterwards, we really want to take a look at what life is like beyond trauma.
Absolutely.
I have experienced my own version of post-traumatic growth, and I know that there's so much beauty to be held on the other side of trauma. And I know that you know that firsthand as well. So I am honored that you're here to share your story. So let's talk about, where does your story really start? I know. There's probably a lot of layers to it, but where do you feel comfortable starting?
I'd like to start, I guess let's start back when my father passed away.
How old were you at that time?
I was 14 when my dad passed away. My parents had gotten divorced, and I had actually been living with him. And my mom, she does the best that she can do because, people do what they can do until they know better.
Right.
And she wasn't raised to know how to handle a lot of stress and stuff like that. She was raised to be quiet, submissive, and fearful. And after my dad passed away, I was forced to go live with her, and she immediately moved in some married guy that didn't see eye to eye with us. And me being the vocal person that I am, vocalized my disdain towards this situation. And we didn't get along because of it. I have an older brother. He was more the just go in his room and hide from the situation type of thing.
Gotcha.
Where me and my mom fought nonstop. I had a job and was working to save for my own car, but she started making me pay rent due to the ideas being placed on her from her, at the time, boyfriend. And I told her no, I wasn't going to pay rent. I wanted to save for a car. I wanted to be able to go do the things I wanted to do and be a teenager and stuff like that. But she ended up kicking me out when I was 15. So I've been on my own ever since. And what does a 15-year-old do, for food?
I can't imagine.
Clothing, shelter.
Yeah.
You leech on to whoever will take you in. So I made a lot of bad decisions and went with older men and stuff like that to be able to have a roof and eat and those kinds of things. And I ended up in some pretty severe physical abusive situations due to that. My last physically abusive situation, he ended up stabbing me, and I took a steel baseball bat to him and put him in the hospital, and just kind of never went back. And I lived with friends after that for a little bit, and I met my ex-husband. At the time, I was just like, oh man, he's not physically abusive. We have fun, we're drinking, we're going out, and all the fun stuff. And after we got married, the control started. it was probably a couple years after my kids were born that the control really took shape. It was it was subtle, you know, and coming from the background, I didn't have the skills to say, oh, this is a red flag warning.
Right.
You know, using that intuition, I was never taught to use my intuition. I was taught, okay, this is how it is. It's black and white, and you have a script kind of laid out for you.
Yeah.
So when it started happening like through money, like, okay, we can afford this, let's budget it $100 a week, you know, for food, for, you know, all these other things. And he would just spend tons of money, and then I would have to try to recoup, or he would go to his mother to recoup it. And because of that, his mom started hating me. Like, she was very vocal about not liking me, very vocal about isolation within the family. She didn't allow her husband to speak to his family. She didn't speak to hers. You know, I wasn't allowed to speak to mine. None of that. And the more further and further it went, even though my kids were growing, they were very active into sports.
Yeah.
And, you know, very friend-oriented kids, I was still left with $100 as a budget for food, gas, clothes for my children, you know, to afford the football expenses because they were really into football, and to be able to, like, whatever, if I wanted to take a trip with them, I had to hide it, you know, that kind of thing. Well, this was when we were still up in Chicago, which is where I'm from, and we decided to move down to Tennessee, and I was like, great, we'll have a break, start things over. I'm not trying to badmouth, but his mom is very controlling. Like, it was more like they were married than me and him were.
Oh, wow.
She was in my household. She was telling us what to do with our home, what to do with my kids, you know, all the things that a married couple is supposed to form a family unit under a roof, she was involved in, which I didn't see at the time. I thought, okay, they're just really close. You know?
Right, yeah.
Yeah. And until we moved down here, she insisted on moving with us, and she took over the move. She bought land. He insisted we put our home on her land, so we didn't have a mortgage. Like, he didn't want nothing to do with independence kind of thing. So, and which, you know, obviously he was taught because of how controlling she was, how to be controlling.
Yeah.
And I didn't see that at the time, of course, you know. You never do. You're just like, you know, quit being this way. And I didn't understand what it was like to be involved in a relationship that wasn't controlling. But eventually it got to where we were fighting nonstop. I had made a really good living in real estate while we were still up north. I had made over $1 million in 2 years with it, with flipping homes and stuff like that. And I hid it from him because I knew he would take the money. Well, he ended up finding it, and he blew every penny of it. So when we moved down here, it was, no family, no friends, no money, no real way out. And I think it was kind of planned that way kind of thing, because he saw I was able to survive without him, you know, on the other side of it. And it just kept going further and further down to the point where I was done. I looked at my life one day and I was just like, who am I? You know, I don't know who I am, and no matter how much I tried to change it with him, he just would clamp down even more, kind of thing. So I finally snuck to be able to save $900, because where I was living at, the top, you know, pay was like $10 an hour. It was rural, it was secluded, it was isolated, and I took both of my kids and I left, and I said, I'm done with this. You know, I can't live under this control no more. Well, my oldest at the time was starting to drive. He had a truck, and he needed insurance and gas, and making $10 an hour trying to start over is about next to impossible. And my youngest is a type 1 diabetic, so I also had insulin that I had to buy. And eventually I couldn't afford to keep them. So I had no choice. And I knew I was losing the house I was renting. So for like 2 weeks, I knew all this was coming up, that I was going to lose my home. We were going to be homeless. And there's nowhere up there for homeless people. So I knew I had to come to Knoxville. But my kids' lives were based up in Claiborne County. And they had worked really hard for what they had done. They were getting scholarships to colleges and stuff like that. And regardless of our relationship, I knew they were loved there. I knew they'd be fed. I knew they'd have, a roof over their head. So I sent them back to live with him, knowing what was going to happen, because I can only imagine what would have happened to their spirit if I would have took them into homelessness with me. It would have devastated them. Their life would be completely different. So I knew what was going to happen. I sent them back, and while I was homeless, he filed for divorce in full custody. So I couldn't afford a lawyer to fight for them. I couldn't, really do much of anything. I was actually sleeping in my car when the officer came up to my window and knocked on my window and said, "You've been served." And I was just like, now what, because I stayed at a hotel, and when I could afford it, I would, rent a room. If not, the guy let us keep our cars there if we weren't like troublesome. So, going through all that, I guess with homelessness, there was a big turn for me and a big push to get out of it instead of waiting for help, because we hadn't been separated for over a year, so they still consider that married income together. So I didn't qualify for help. Wow. I was making $20 too much for emergency funds. And it's like, okay, you either don't work, get the help, wait a year to be put onto a 2-year waiting list for housing, or you get busy doing something about it. Because I noticed homelessness becomes normal for people. It's an everyday survival routine.
Yeah.
They wake up, they have their daily routine that they do, and it becomes normal waiting. And I was just like, no, I can't do that. So, yeah, I couldn't do that. So I did what I had to do, and I worked 3 jobs. I barely ate. I didn't, have friends or anything like that, but I got out of it within 4 months. A lady, I had been going through like Craigslist and all these other places trying to find homes or a room to rent. And
so for the 4 months you slept in your car?
In my car or in the hotel room, if I could afford it. If I would just really needed a
for
bed.
the night. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I found this lady on Craigslist. I had gone to a few other houses where people were just creepy. I went there. She had a daughter. She's like, I have a room to rent. And I was like, okay. I go, I can't afford it for a couple weeks, but I definitely want it. Let me give you $100 as a deposit, and then in a couple weeks I'll come fully in. She goes, you're not going back to that hotel. She goes, go get your stuff. You're fine. So she took me in, and, really helped me. Went there. I had a home-cooked meal, first time in a few months. And, yeah, she was like my savior at the time.
Yeah.
But eventually, my kids quit talking to me. I met my now husband when he was going through his own mess. And while we were both a mess, I believe people still come into your life at the exact time for everything. He had lost his wife of 38 years suddenly. So he was going down the path of drinking really heavy. And eventually my kids quit talking to me. So I started drinking heavily because I didn't know how else to deal with it. And I'm not a drug user. I can't because I'm allergic to everything. So it was more socially acceptable to drink too. So I went down that path of really going into being addicted to alcohol severely. I had gotten up to, we were both sharing a gallon of whiskey every day. Both of us were. And I had seizures from it, and I would have to have an ambulance called on me because I wasn't breathing. And eventually, I don't remember this part, but this is what my now husband tells me. He had left for to go to the grocery store. And at that point, I wasn't a functional person. I quit all my jobs. I lost my car. I couldn't sleep all night without getting up and having to have a drink because of the withdrawals. But he come home and he found me on the bed. I drank a whole fifth of whiskey within 2 hours, and I had a loaded gun in my mouth, and I was getting ready to shoot. And he tackled me and got the gun out of my, away from me, and I woke up 4 days later in the hospital. But this is where it kind of starts to turn, because at that point, I was at my lowest low.
Yeah.
And a nurse had come in, and she was asking me, how did you end up like this? What happened? Because before that, I wasn't a drinker. I had, my life was my kids. And I might have a glass of wine on the weekends every once in a while, but I wasn't a drinker.
Yeah.
And I was telling her a little bit about my story, and she's like, okay, so what are you going to do now? And I'm like, what do you mean, what am I going to do now? I have no car, no house, no job, no family, no friends. And she goes, you have a clean slate. She goes, you have no responsibilities to worry about. She goes, so what do you want to choose to do? And she goes, you can either choose to end up in a grave, or you can choose to create a life that you want to live. And nobody's ever asked me, what I wanted. Nobody's ever told me I had a choice. And I enrolled in college that day. And I was just like, I've got to do something, different. This isn't the path I want to go down. And I don't want my kids to end up, even though they weren't talking to me, I didn't want them to end up without a mom, over something they can decide later to reverse, with our relationship. So I enrolled in school. I kind of gave my now husband an ultimatum. Told him, I can't do this. You're either going to straighten up and get the help you need, or we're going to have to go our separate ways. It's not that I didn't understand what he was going through.
But you were ready to make a change.
I was ready to make a change. And you can't keep those same people around you when you're making that change.
Exactly.
And he sobered up. He did it by himself instead of going to the hospital. Ended up putting himself into almost liver failure. And at the time, too, on top of it, his father was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. So he sobered up, got healthy again. We moved in with his dad, and we ended up getting married a few years later. As I was graduating college, though, COVID hit. So all internships were down, right? And I'm like, what am I going to do now? I got to keep moving forward,
Yeah.
So
that's so funny. I graduated college right in COVID as well.
Yeah.
September, actually.
Really? Mine was January
Wow.
of 2020.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I started my own business. I was like, I got the time because of the situation with his dad and helping with his dad.
Yeah.
I was like, I've got the time, I've got the space, I've got the equipment. Let's start an online business. So I started with marketing, which, I've never ran a business, so I didn't know what it entailed. Nobody ever knew ran a business, so I had nobody to advise me. And I ended up meeting a coach, and she was telling me what a coach does and stuff like that. And so that's why I went into doing business coaching for sales at first, because of my experience with real estate. And that went pretty good. But then, I noticed I was attracting people who had been through it, who really didn't understand how to increase their mindset in a way that could help them make real changes in their life. They were still playing victim, and that understandably so. But again, we do what we know how to do until we know better.
Yeah.
And I decided to take a mindfulness certification course for coaching, and I hired my coach, who I've been with for about 3.5 years now. And I've just been, that's when Women Choosing Excellence was kind of created. I've just been doing a lot of self-discovery, I guess you could say, because I've never known myself before.
Yeah.
And, you know, I would love to say this is an overnight progression. It's not.
Yeah, no, yeah.
No. And I wish, you know, online you see a lot of these things, people saying, join my course for 90 days and you'll be, you know, this elaborate, happy person, when if you've been through a lot, you have a lot of pathways you have to maneuver and habits you have to change, and
Yes.
the way you think and your values and your belief systems. And I got certified as an NLP coach also, because I dove really big into, okay, well, why do I feel this way when it's no longer here, you know, about certain things, and why does my mind keep replaying? And, you know, I wanted to understand my own mind with the trauma.
Yeah.
I eventually got diagnosed with post-traumatic stress syndrome. Not disorder, but a syndrome.
Okay.
And I was put on anxiety pills, which have saved my life. If you need that help, I highly recommend doing it. You know, I had to calm my mind down in order to really understand my scenario, my situation, what I wanted, where was I going, how can I, you know, start, you know, bringing friends and, you know, what I call adopted family into my life that are on the same path as me.
Yeah.
Instead of going to a bar and listening to the same story every week, you know,
Right.
from other people.
Yeah, yeah.
But that's what's led me to where I'm at now. And, you know, I'm not done growing. There's no way I'm done growing.
Right.
And
I love that.
Yeah, there's no way I'm done growing. I hope I'm never done growing. But to get to a place of happiness, I guess, has been recent. You know, I had to grieve my kids who were still alive.
Yeah.
I had to go through that because they still don't talk to me. They were trained, well, if she couldn't afford to buy you name brand clothes, she was not a good mom. I was about ready to be. So it took me a lot to grieve my kids and just accept they're adults now, and they make their own choices, and when they're ready to find out more, and when the timing's right for them, they'll show up. Eventually they'll remember who I was, you know, as the football mom, and their friends coming over and us having, you know, a good time and stuff like that. So they'll eventually remember that. And then I had to also forgive people who were not sorry. And that was the hardest thing to do. And forgive myself, because I used to think, what mom ends up without her kids? You know, what mom does that? What kind of parent am I? Am I like my mom? And, you know, I just was on a mission to kind of break that cycle of, it seems to be around 15, 16 years old when the family always seems to separate in my timeline. And I had to forgive myself for it. You know, I had to forgive. I didn't know how to survive. I didn't believe in myself to survive. And I had to forgive him. And I basically just, it wasn't needing to hear I'm sorry. I didn't tell him I forgave him. I just took my energy back from that situation. And I stopped giving it my energy. And gave it to what I wanted to create.
Yeah.
So.
That's a hard thing.
Oh, yeah.
It's a hard thing
and
to
I
learn
can't
to
say
do.
it's all the way through done.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah, of course.
Yeah.
I get that. There's definitely a struggle at times to forgive people either who aren't sorry or who are no longer here to be able to say they're sorry.
Right.
And that's when you really learn that the forgiveness in general is about you and it's not about them anyways.
Yeah.
It's really about, like you said, like either just letting go or taking back your energy, like using it for other things. And it's not easy, but once you are able to start to do that and to see what it's going to feel like as you begin to just no longer feel like that burden on you, like it's such a freeing feeling. Like,
it is.
Yeah. You realize that you have so much more within you. Your capacity is so much bigger because you're not bogged down with holding on to the hatred or the resentment or the shame or anything else that I
do a meditation. It's called detaching your strings. where you envision like all these people in a circle around you, and they all have a string attached to you, and I call it your energy cords. And you basically go to each person and you cut that string, and you, however much of your energy you're giving to that person or that scenario, if you need to cut that, closer to them and pull all that energy back to you in the meditation. I'm a very visualizing meditator.
Yeah.
And you pull that string back and you allow them to pull their string back. And then if it's feeling a little bit better, okay, you don't need as much energy. Maybe they need that energy. Instead of, you giving your energy to them, let them take their own energy back. And it just disconnects you kind of from the need to always think about it, feel about it, have it present in your life, define yourself by it, all those things, because you're not those things.
Right.
Even though your journey is important and gets you to where you're at now, you're never those things that used to happen.
Yeah. And
I think a lot of people think that, okay, I forgave him. How do I be happy now? I must, as soon as I forgive this person, I'll just know who I am.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it don't work that way. You have to really.
It's a work.
It's a repetitive process, and then you have to take your energy and start discovering who you are without that in your present life. And that's one thing I learned in mindfulness training is it's all about being present. It's about, okay, if you're thinking, okay, now I'm going to just sit here, close my eyes, feel my skin, get into my present body instead of living in my past. And, it takes practice, but I think that's where a lot of people give up, or they get stuck in that almost depressive state or isolated state.
Yeah.
And mental health, issues and stuff like that is because they think it's just like a one and done thing. Yeah. Instead of allowing it to be part of their journey.
That's so true.
Yeah.
Yeah. I agree with that. And I love that you mentioned some tools that have helped you. The mindfulness and the meditation. And
absolutely.
Is that meditation, is that just something that you've created or that you do, or is that something that somebody can find somewhere, like if they choose to look for that?
It's something that I do, but I will be putting it on my website as part of my resources.
Okay.
I actually have a few meditations that I'll be uploading on there because I think it's really important for people to have somewhere to start. And, coaching, it's expensive. And especially with, trying to figure out, okay, what's the right path for me? Do I see a therapist? Do I see a psychologist? Do I hire a life coach? What's the avenue there? And I think people need just a little bit of a taste and some tools to get themselves to a point of being confident enough to decide that path for them.
Yeah.
So, and I know a lot of business owners don't give a lot away for free, but I do at first because it's so in depth. It's not just a one and done thing. Yeah. And I want people to have those resources available without having to worry about money.
Yeah, it is true. I know when I first got into life coaching, I got in as a client, and it was the biggest investment I'd ever made as an individual. Yeah. And, for me at the time, so my husband at the time had passed away from COVID, and I found a group for widowed moms. And so I had, a little bit of money that was coming in from different sources after he had passed away. And I thought, I can't be who I need to be for myself and for my kids unless I get some kind of help. And when I saw this, I immediately felt connected to the coach. And so I made the investment, and it was huge. It was like close to $7,000. And I still have sticker shock over it. And I'm like, but the tools that I learned from that and the path that it set me on in my life personally, I would never take that back.
Yeah.
would never take it back.
No.
And if I was in that same place again, I would make the same decision.
Absolutely.
Because, I made it blindly, not knowing how it would help me or what it would do. I just had a little bit of faith that this was a big deal for me.
Yeah.
And it was. And I don't regret it. And I love it. I know you're into coaching, and so that set me on my path. I was into coaching, just became certified in December, and love it. But very new. But I'm kind of at this place where it's like a progression. So like you said, it's not an instant, like you make a decision and then you do it and then all of a sudden everything's perfect. It's definitely a process that I'm just embracing and learning how to walk in, like little by little, and to accept the changes as they come.
Absolutely.
So I could definitely identify with that piece of your story, because it's nothing happens overnight.
No. As a matter of fact, I've personally invested. Well, I've also done business coaching too, or invested in business coaching. But I've personally invested $50,000 in myself to, over the past 3 years, to bring me to the point of where I'm at. But like I said, I needed training for business too, for my own thing. But along with that, it is mindset. And, I want women to know you can start a business, but even if you're the happiest person in the world, when you start a business, you have to have that mindset training to move forward, to get out of your way, to, have that support to take risks, like investments. And, part of that, I also have a section that's called the Women's Business Hub, where we combine that my Women Choosing Excellence with the business training.
Okay.
But my main thing is the Women Choosing Excellence, because it doesn't matter. Maybe you're a stay-at-home mom, which is a career in itself.
Yes.
That's not valued enough. I think we should get paid for doing that.
Yes. Yeah. It's a big job.
It is. Yeah. And, I don't want whatever career path it is, or maybe they don't want a big career path. Maybe they just like, the ability to go somewhere and come home and not have to worry about that. But I want them to know that you just got to start, and you have to just have an ounce of belief. I had no clue how I was going to pay for coaching. It left me $50 in my account the first time I invested, and it was $5,000. And I was just like, I have no clue how I'm going to do this, but it worked out. And it seems like when you take that leap of faith, you're rewarded for it in some way.
For sure. For sure. Okay, so part of the coaching that I help people with is mindset coaching. I love that, and I think it's such a crucial part. If your mindset is not on track, you're really not going to be able to accomplish much of anything. I really do believe that is at the core of all growth, all success comes back to our mindset. So one thing that I do with my clients, all of my clients, I ask them to every day to write down 3 things that they are grateful for, that they can identify within the last 24 hours. And the reason for this is because so often when we look at gratitude, we look at, I'm grateful for my home. I'm grateful for my husband or my boyfriend. And these are fabulous things to be grateful for.
Yeah.
But we stop looking because we can only name so many that are so big. And so when we can look and make ourselves look at every little thing that we're grateful for in our lives, then we can start to focus on those things and drown out the negativity.
Yes.
And I think that's so important. So I am going to ask you, if you can name for me 3 things within the last 24 hours that you're grateful for.
I'm grateful for my friend Alicia. She is such a big influence in my life now. She connected with me yesterday, and I was telling her some of my plans, and she's like one of my biggest cheerleaders. So I'm super grateful for her. I'm grateful to be able to sit out on my back deck. I have squirrels that actually literally come up and sit on the cushion next to me eating peanuts. And I've never had that space before. And it's kind of like my little sanctuary. So I'm really grateful. This morning I was able to do that. And I'm grateful for, at one point I didn't have food. So I'm really grateful to wake up every day to have food. Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. Well, Amy, thank you so much.
Thank you
for being here. And all of your information we were going to link in the show notes. Is there anything else before we go that you just want to just put out there for any woman who maybe finds themselves in situations similar to yours with relationships or with their children or in business or just in general?
I just want people to know that the word impossible actually has the word I am possible. So if whatever you think is impossible to change, to do, abusive relationships, while I know there's a lot of fear factor there, there's a lot of people out there willing to help you. You just have to choose. You have to choose to put yourself first. And, even, through trauma, you're not your trauma. You just have to rediscover who you are on the other side of that trauma. And, allow that the thing that happened to not be who you define yourself by. And just, love. We're all love. And start understanding that you get to be with people who are love also.
That's beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amy, for joining me.
Thank you.
And I appreciate you being here.
Can I say my website real quick?
Yes, please. Please
if you would like
tell
to
people where to
connect
find
further,
you.
go to choosingexcellence.com. You can find me on Facebook at Amy Woods Business Coaching, and on LinkedIn it's Amy Woods Coaching. So come connect.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Amy.
Thank you.
I appreciate you.
Same here.